You're listening to Mr. Credit on San Diego 1700 with local credit expert Derek Evans. Now, live in studio, Mr. Credit.
Good afternoon, San Diego. Thanks for tuning us in. You're listening to Mr. Credit on San Diego 1700. We thank you for sharing your lunch hour with us. My name is William McDonald. I'm a local bankruptcy attorney here in San Diego. And every Wednesday, as you may know, Mr. Credit and I discuss bankruptcy law. And I'm going to be filling in for Mr. Credit today. He's out of town spreading the word on credit education across the country. So don't forget to visit Mr. Credit online. You can reach him at mrcreditradio.com. You may reach him by phone. His number is 858-571-0271. Mr. Credit always likes to hear from you. He's there to improve your credit and work with you on any credit issues you may have, answer any questions. He also has some great education videos online. Again, free videos, mrcreditradio.com. I'd like to start today by briefly introducing myself and my paralegal, Lisa Bowman, who is in studio with me today. As I mentioned, I'm a bankruptcy attorney here in San Diego. I'm licensed to practice law in both Oregon and California. I spent the first 5 years of my career working at a mid-sized law firm representing creditors of all things. And my practice entailed working with creditors in bankruptcy matters. So I was representing their interest in the bankruptcy courts both in Oregon and California. And after about 5 years, I finally came to my senses and started representing individuals. So in 2007, I started my own law firm. It's the McDonald Legal Group. And I specialize in representing individuals in bankruptcy, primarily Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. And we'll get into a lot of what those chapters are and what you can do in those chapters. And if you have any bankruptcy questions and you don't feel like coming online today or giving us a call, call me directly. My number is 858-437-0103. Again, my number 858-437-0103. As I mentioned, my paralegal, Lisa Bowman, is in studio, and I'd like to introduce her. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, William. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks.
Thanks for having me on today.
You're welcome. Why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Oh, my background. Well, I have 15 years' experience as a paralegal in San Diego, specifically relating to bankruptcy law. My first 7 years were spent assisting debtors filing bankruptcy. Then, as you did, I tried out the other side of the playing field, so to speak, representing mortgage corporations, and realized that working in corporate America didn't really provide me with any gratification. So I decided to join up with you and go back to my roots of assisting people to obtain a fresh financial start.
Excellent. So when we talk about bankruptcy, the major players, there's three major players we know. There's the debtors, and a lot of times I have my clients and they say, They believe a creditor is actually a debtor, and they get those terms mixed up. So a debtor is somebody that is actually filing for bankruptcy.
Correct. The debtor is the one that is filing for bankruptcy and that needs the bankruptcy protection.
Correct. And then we have the creditors, of course, that are out there trying to collect on their debt. And then the third party, which a lot of is confusing to most people, is the trustee.
Right.
And the trustee is there to administer the case. So you have, if you file under Chapter 7, you have a Chapter 7 trustee, and Chapter 13, you have a Chapter 13 trustee. So they're kind of in the administrative role.
Right. They kind of step into the shoes of the debtor as of the date of the filing. And any property that you own when you file a bankruptcy basically becomes property of the bankruptcy, what we call estate. And the trustee is there to administer the case and see if there's any funds available in the estate to pay your creditors, if any, which generally is not the case, but it is an option.
And that's speaking in Chapter 7. Of
Correct.
course, in Chapter 13, the trustee's role is to collect payments from you monthly and distribute those. And we'll get into the differences between those a little bit later in the show. So in you've had experience in basically all three of those realms of bankruptcy, from the debtor perspective, the trustee perspective, and also from the creditor side.
Yeah, broad spectrum.
Okay, great. With that, I think I'd like to just kind of give you some nuts and bolts of bankruptcy. And a lot of people get confused with the different chapters out there. They hear different things or read different information on the internet. But for the most part, we can make it pretty simple. There's two chapters for most individuals. It's either a Chapter 7, which we call a liquidation chapter, And there's a Chapter 13 where it's a wage earner plan, if you will, where you're going to, based upon your earnings, you're going to make a plan payment every month and pay your creditors back over 3 to 5 years. So now you hear on the news, of course, a lot about Chapter 11, and that's because that's what the big businesses and corporations typically will file as Chapter 11, where they're filing, for GM or Chrysler. The airlines, of course, you've heard them going into Chapter 11. And then the other chapter you may have heard is Chapter 12, but that's really reserved for family farmers or fishermen.
Which doesn't really apply here in San Diego.
It doesn't apply too much. So for the most part, in my practice, I see the majority of Chapter 7 cases and then also a great deal of Chapter 13s.
Right.
So we're helping individuals who are filing under those two chapters. So I think it's important to, from the outset, just let people know that filing for bankruptcy is actually something our forefathers thought about in framing the Constitution, in that the Constitution authorizes Congress to establish uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcy. So this is such an important law to protect individuals that the framers of the Constitution wanted to give Congress that power to legislate bankruptcy laws, which they have done. And the first Bankruptcy Act was passed back in 1898. So in a sense, it's your constitutional right to file bankruptcy. It's nothing to feel guilty about, and many people have taken advantage of the bankruptcy. And in fact, 1.5 million families every year file for bankruptcy in the United States. So I know people are usually embarrassed. They don't want to talk about bankruptcy. So when people come into my office, they think they're the only ones that are having financial difficulties. And as I mentioned, 1.5 million families have filed. So we see bankruptcy is more common than people think. And of those 1.5 million, we have a lot of famous people that have filed. And I think it's always interesting to look at some of those famous people. I know you know a few famous people, Lisa, that have filed for bankruptcy.
Well, off the top of my head, the most famous one I can think of is Donald Trump. He's filed twice, actually. So if he can file, then
Right.
it just tells you that people like you and me definitely have a right to file as well and get that relief from the bankruptcy court and eliminate some of those debts. Another one that comes to my mind that was a hot topic the last few years is Anna Nicole Smith. She actually filed bankruptcy as well, and the whole deal that she was going with regarding the estate of her late husband was administered through the bankruptcy court, actually. So that's an interesting fact.
That was a very interesting case that actually went up all the way to the Supreme Court on her case. And the point there is, look how successful Donald Trump is. So, when you're filing for bankruptcy, I know your morale is down and, you feel kind of down in the dumps, but it's a chance for you to get a fresh start, to rebuild, and look at Donald Trump. He's more successful than ever, building casinos in Vegas, and he has so many real estate projects that are going forward. So there's also guys like Henry Heinz, Heinz Ketchup. He filed for bankruptcy. Walt Disney, Henry Ford,
Larry King twice.
If I
remember
Larry
correctly.
King. That's really amazing. So. It's nothing to feel bad about. Filing for bankruptcy is a tool there for you to get back on your feet. And really, when you think about it, bankruptcy is the only leverage that individuals have, that the good guys have against creditors. Creditors have all these tools. They can take collection action. They can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts. And the only leverage that the average Joe has is bankruptcy.
Yep.
So we find a lot of people coming into our office who are facing wage garnishment, are facing the harassment, the calls, the collection letters.
Foreclosure,
absolutely. We're seeing a lot of that now.
Car
with the economy.
repossessions.
And that's where we're here to help you. We can sit down, look at your financial situation, look at your income and your expenses, and we can figure out a way to stop that so you can get back on your feet, get rid of that harassment so you're not dreading answering the phone or going out to the mailbox. We can actually make answering the ring of your phone not be so dreaded. So bankruptcy is a powerful tool to level the playing field for individuals. And first and foremost, it's a powerful tool to stop, as we said, the foreclosure, repossession, judgment, stop harassment, stop wage garnishment. And with that, I'd like to just, as we're going to head into our first break here, I want to open up the phone lines to our listeners out there.
Here's your chance, guys.
Get your questions into me, and we can answer those, address those on the air today.